Have you ever reached a point where you finally achieved everything you thought you wanted, only to be met with a strange, hollow silence? Imagine sitting in the car after a long day at a job that everyone tells you is a dream. You look at your reflection in the rearview mirror and realize you don't recognize the person looking back. Why is it that we can be objectively successful but subjectively miserable? Why does a voice deep inside sometimes whisper that our entire life is a well-constructed lie? Why do we feel a sudden, violent urge to walk away from a stable relationship or a secure career for something we can't even name yet? Most importantly, why does it feel like there are two different people living inside your skin and they are currently at war with each other? This conflict isn't just a sign of stress, it is a fundamental signal from your biology and your spirit. We often spend our 20s and 30s building a life that makes sense to our parents, our peers, and our social media followers. We collect the degrees, we secure the titles, we buy the furniture. But one morning, you wake up and realize you've built a beautiful house that you don't actually want to live in. You feel like an actor who has been playing a role for so long that you've forgotten your own name. This video is for anyone who feels that gap widening. It is for those who feel the wrongness of a good life. These questions point toward a profound psychological crossroads. It is the moment when the life your ego built no longer fits the person your inner self is becoming. Today, we are going to explore the mechanics of this internal friction. We will analyze the specific ways your deep, authentic core tries to communicate when it is being suffocated by your social mask. Clarity will only emerge once you understand that this discomfort isn't a breakdown, it is a breakthrough. Think of this tension as the labor pains of a new identity. The ego is terrified because it feels like its world is ending. But the inner self is excited because it knows that your true life is finally beginning. By the end of this video, you will understand how to distinguish the demands of your ego from the call of your true self. You will learn that the midlife crisis or the quarter-life burnout is actually a vital invitation to stop surviving and start existing. It is an evolutionary nudge to move beyond the shallow waters of social acceptance and into the deep ocean of your actual potential. To understand this conflict, we must look at Carl Jung's map of the psyche. Jung made a clear distinction between the ego and the self. The ego is the small, conscious part of you. It is the captain of the ship who thinks he is in charge. It focuses on the external world, social standing, and keeping things predictable. The ego is essentially a survival mechanism. It is the part of you that worries about the mortgage, the dress code, and the opinions of your neighbors. It craves correctness and consistency because it believes these are the keys to safety. The self, with a capital S, is the entirety of your being. It includes your conscious mind, your vast unconscious, and your untapped potential. The self is the actual ocean the ship is sailing on. While the ego wants a life that looks good on paper, the self wants wholeness. It wants to experience the full range of your humanity, including the parts of you that might be inconvenient or messy for your social life. The self is not interested in your job title. It is interested in your vitality. It is the architect of your destiny, while the ego is merely the contractor trying to follow a set of outdated blueprints. The conflict begins because the ego is inherently limited. It builds your life based on the rules of your childhood and the pressures of your current society. If you grew up in a family that valued stoicism, your ego built a persona of someone who is always calm and never needs help. This persona served you well for years. It got you through school and helped you climb the corporate ladder. But the ego ignores the deeper needs because they don't fit the brand. It suppresses the parts of you that don't earn money or win friends. Over time, these suppressed parts don't go away. They go into what Jung called the shadow. They sit in the dark, waiting for a chance to be heard. The shadow contains everything you've rejected about yourself to stay safe or lovable. If you spent your whole life being the responsible one, your shadow might contain a wild, spontaneous artist. If you've always been the nice one, your shadow might contain a powerful, assertive leader who is tired of being walked on. The inner self wants to bring these shadow elements into the light, but the ego resists because it fears the change will ruin everything you've built. Think of a real-life example of a successful corporate lawyer who, at age 40, suddenly feels a desperate need to start a garden or teach children. The ego is horrified. It says, "We have spent 20 years building this reputation. We have a mortgage and a status to maintain. What will the neighbors think?" This is the ego's primary weapon, the fear of social death. It convinces you that if you change course now, you will lose your value. But the inner self is starving. It is tired of the cold, analytical world of contracts and billable hours. It wants to touch the earth and see things grow. The burnout this lawyer feels isn't because the work is hard. Humans can do hard work when it means something. The burnout is because the work is a betrayal of the self. Every hour spent in that office feels like a withdrawal from the soul's bank account. The tension you feel in your life is often the distance between the life your ego is defending and the life your self is demanding. When that distance becomes too great, the system begins to fail. This friction often shows up as symptoms that we try to medicate or ignore. We call it depression, but Jung often viewed it as the soul's way of going on strike. If the ego refuses to listen to the inner self simply stops providing energy for the ego's projects. You wake up feeling heavy. You lose interest in your hobbies. You feel a sense of ennui or meaninglessness. It's as if the battery of your life has been disconnected. This is the inner self saying, "If you won't live a life that includes me, I won't help you live at all." It is a protective mechanism designed to stop you from going further down the wrong path. Modern life teaches us to push through this fatigue with caffeine, discipline, and sheer willpower. But discipline is often just the ego's whip. The more you push, the more the inner self retreats, leaving you feeling like a hollow shell of a person. You might find yourself successful by every external metric, yet unable to feel a single spark of joy in your own accomplishments. Consider how this plays out in modern relationships. Many people choose a partner based on ego-driven criteria. They look for someone who looks good in photos, someone who is stable, or someone who their parents would approve of. The ego feels safe with this correct choice because it minimizes social risk. But 3 years later, the inner self starts to feel suffocated. It craves a deeper, more raw connection that the current relationship doesn't allow. The ego tries to maintain the appearance of the perfect couple because its identity is wrapped up in that status. This creates a painful internal split. You become a person who says, "I love you," while feeling a profound sense of loneliness. You are physically present, but emotionally 1,000 miles away. You might even start to resent your partner for the perfect life you've built together, not because they are a bad person, but because the relationship has become a gilded cage for your true self. This is the inner self wanting a different life than the one the ego has carefully curated. Jung called the process of resolving this conflict individuation. It is the journey of becoming who you actually are, rather than who the world told you to be. Individuation requires the ego to stop being the master and start being the student. It is the process of integrating the disparate parts of your personality into a cohesive whole. It requires you to look at your shadow, those parts of yourself you've hidden away because they were too much or not enough. Maybe your shadow contains your lost creativity. Maybe it contains your hidden anger or your secret desire for adventure. The inner self wants to integrate these parts back into your life. It wants you to be a whole person, even if a whole person is less convenient for your social circle than the polished mask you've been wearing. Wholeness is the goal of the human experience, not perfection. Perfection is an ego goal. Wholeness is a soul goal. Being whole means being willing to be unpopular or misunderstood in exchange for being real. Let's look at a modern example of social media. The ego thrives on social media because it is a platform for pure persona. You can edit your life to look exactly how you want it to be perceived. You can filter the sadness and crop out the clutter. But the more time you spend polishing the image, the more the inner self feels abandoned. The inner self doesn't care about likes or followers. It cares about being known and being seen in its raw state. When you post a photo of a beautiful meal while you are actually feeling lonely and sad, you are widening the gap between the ego and the self. This gap is where anxiety lives. The bigger the difference between your actual life and your performed life, the more terrified the ego becomes of being found out. It lives in constant fear that someone will see through the filter. This leads to a frantic, exhausting cycle of performance that leaves you feeling more disconnected than ever. You are famous to strangers, but a stranger to yourself. How do we start to bridge this gap? It begins with radical honesty. You have to be willing to admit that the life you've built might be a prison. This is terrifying because the ego believes that if the life it built falls apart, you will die. It equates its structure with your survival. But you are not your life. You are the one living it. You are the source of life, not the result of it. Jung suggested that we pay attention to our dreams, our sudden emotional outbursts, and our projections. Projections are especially revealing. If you find yourself deeply annoyed by someone who is lazy and irresponsible, it might be your inner self's way of saying that you are being too rigid and controlled. You are projecting your own suppressed need for rest onto them and then attacking it. The things that trigger us in others are often the very things our inner self is desperate for us to acknowledge in ourselves. They are the missing pieces of our own wholeness. Real life change often looks like a series of small, inconvenient choices. It might mean saying no to a social event you don't enjoy so you can sit in silence. It might mean changing your career path, even if it means a lower salary or a loss of prestige. It might mean finally having the difficult conversation you've been avoiding for years to protect the peace. Each time you choose the truth of the self over the image of the ego, you are reclaiming a piece of your energy. You will notice that as you align your life with your inner self, your chronic fatigue and anxiety begin to lift. This is because you are no longer using all your energy to suppress your own nature. It's like finally turning off a heavy machinery that has been running in the background of your mind for decades. You are finally rowing with the current of your own soul rather than against it. You feel a sense of rightness that no amount of money or praise could ever provide. We started by asking why we feel like two people at war. We feel this way because we have been trained to serve the ego at the expense of the self. We have been taught that success is external when true success is internal alignment. We asked why we feel the urge to walk away from good lives. We feel this way because a life can be good by society's standards but toxic for your specific soul. A diamond ring is useless if it's cutting off your circulation. And we asked why we don't recognize the person in the mirror. We don't recognize them because that person is a mask we've been wearing for so long that we've forgotten the face beneath it. We have become experts at being who we are supposed to be, but we are amateurs at being who we are. The war inside you is simply your soul trying to remind you of your own name. It is a call to return to the center. The clarity that emerges is this: your inner self doesn't want to destroy your life. It wants to save you from a life that is too small for you. It wants to break the shell so the bird can fly. The crisis you are feeling isn't a sign that you are failing at being a person. It is a sign that you are succeeding at outgrowing your old identity. The ego wants a different life because it is scared of the unknown and wants to fix the discomfort. But the inner self wants a different life because it knows what you are capable of. It knows the gifts you haven't used, the words you haven't spoken, and the love you haven't given. It knows that you are more than your bank account and more than your reputation. It is pushing you toward the unlived life that is still waiting for you. The fear you feel is just the ego's resistance to its own promotion from being the boss to being the assistant. The shift from living for the ego to living for the self is the birth of true maturity. It is the moment you stop asking, "What does the world want from me?" Instead, you start asking, "What is trying to live through me?" When you align the captain with the ocean, the journey becomes more than just a struggle for survival. It becomes an adventure of discovery. You are not a project to be managed by your ego. You are a mystery to be lived by yourself. The discomfort you feel today is the call to begin that journey. It is the beginning of a process where you trade your certainties for your truth. It is time to stop defending the fortress and start exploring the world. The life you've been waiting for is on the other side of the person you've been pretending to be. You just have to be brave enough to let the old version of you go so the real version can finally take the lead.